Hello there.
Hello there, and welcome to the Sky Guys podcast. The Star Wars lightsaber battle bracket continues. We are doing the Skywalker region this week. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Phillips. With me, as always, the man who's supposed to hear narration every single week, Pete Consadori is here. Pete, how are you?
Doing well. Just excited to talk about this. We're getting closer. So I'm hoping that we can have a little bit more discussion. I know some of these matchups up until now have been a little bit easy, quote unquote, easy to pick. So I'm curious to see what happens here.
Yep. Also here with us today, the man who will get even more powerful if you try and strike him down. Nick Fraietta is here. Nick, how are you?
Doing great. Back on the Sky Guys after my appearance on Just End the Suffering. We did NBA over unders, and I'm back on the Star Wars side of things.
Yep, Nick did pop over to the other podcast this week, so talk about more about that at the end of the show. But as always, Pete, you want to subscribe to the Sky Guy? You can do so Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn, Spotify, Amazon, all the usual suspects. Simply search for the Sky Guys for your podcast platforms. We're always there. All the fun stuff is here, and we're about halfway through the bracket, so you want to stick around for the exciting finish of what's coming next. Make sure you're subscribed.
You got to be subscribed. It's free. It's easy to subscribe. But what more do you want, right? I mean, it's all there. So definitely subscribe.
Yeah, and Nick, people want to follow the social media. How can I do that?
At Sky Guys Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, X, Threads, and TikTok.
Yep. And speaking of TikTok, this is where our social media comment of the week is coming from. So we'll go to TikTok right now. This is from our discussion about the Yoda Dooku fight last week. This is from Aaron on the TikTok guy. He says here, I've gotten over it, but as a kid, I always wish it was just a force battle after the lackluster duel from Annie and Obi with Dooku. Love the music in both scenes, though. So Aaron's a man after your heart, Nick, where he wiped the force fight.
I agree. Obviously, but it it was nice to see Yoda pull out the lightsaber, though. Like I mentioned, that was like a huge moment in the theater, people going crazy. So that was kind of cool to see. But at the same time, it would have worked better as a force battle.
Yeah, and we see some force battles, some of the ones we're doing this week as well, some force stuff here. But I do think we'll go to the news here, and it's been very quiet on the Star Wars news front. I feel like they're just gearing up for Skeleton Crew press push. So, Nick, do we have anything this week?
We just have that this Star Wars Power Battles, it was called Episode 1 Jedi Power Battles.
Yep.
It came out in like 2000. I think it was on the Game Boy or something.
It might have been like PS1, maybe.
Okay, so it was on PlayStation 1, Dreamcast, Game Boy Advance. And now it's coming out on modern consoles in January, remaster. I never played this game. I never heard of it. So maybe I'll see how it is and give it a try.
Yeah, Pete, have you ever played this game?
No. I think the only Star Wars game I had in Game Boy Advance was the pod racing game. I don't know
Yes,
if you guys remember that. Had the
I
Rumble
remember that
pack
game.
in it.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was fun. I remember too. I had a Dreamcast. Somehow this game slipped by my radar back then too.
Star Wars Episode 1 Racer is the game you're talking about, right?
Yep, that's the one.
Yes.
I
100%.
must have had it on a different console. I definitely didn't have it on a handheld. I don't know if that's the same game though.
It might have been. I want to maybe fact check myself here. It may have been a Game Boy Color game,
It was.
not
I had
a
it on the
Advance.
N64,
Yeah.
but it also that was on PC, N64, Game Boy. I got everything. Now it's on. You can get it now on modern consoles. Actually, that game didn't know that.
They remastered it.
I think it just re-released it.
Ah, all right. So we'll
It
petition
says it's an HD re-release, but a lot of times that just means that they stretch
the
they
screen.
stretch what's it called to 16:9.
Yeah, they expanded the aspect ratio.
Yeah, the aspect ratio. That's usually all they do.
Yeah. So Pete, let's petition for the remaster of the Star Wars Racer game.
Let me tell you something. As much as I want that, I kind of want some original ideas, right? Outlaws, I think was great because it was original ideas. But for let's call it hype. But like I feel like it'll be nostalgic, and I feel like the replayability is going to be bad. So let's push for original ideas.
And speaking of Outlaws, on today of the day of recording, which is October 16th, I should be finishing Outlaws today.
Yeah,
I can sniff the end.
Pete and I are a ways behind you. I feel like.
Yeah, I've put in at least 70 hours.
Yeah, no, I'm like 3 hours in. I am
I put probably,
super behind.
maybe 60, maybe 60. I put in about 60 to 70 hours in the middle there,
Yeah, so
and I started the last mission, and I think I finished, and then there's a little bit more, so I don't know how much longer I have. Could be 10 minutes, could be an hour. I'm not really sure.
when we do this in a couple of weeks, maybe the high roll guys here will have to take a lead on explaining the story here for us.
Yeah, maybe. And to be honest, I'm not. The story is not what's grabbing me. So like, I don't really. I'm not really. Not that I'm not paying attention, but like, I'm not really that interested. I'm just kind of interested in the open worldness of the game and the
And
side quests and the getting your gear and stuff like that.
and dealing with all the cartels.
Yeah, that's the stuff that's making me excited. And before we move on, the last thing I want to mention on that, we did have a question. I think we asked it on the air here. Like, is it possible to keep all the syndicates happy? And that answer is yes. You can be in the best of relations with every single syndicate at the same time.
It just takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it's possible. If you could do the worst at all for all, you could do the best. I don't recommend you do the worst. It's really stupid, but you can do it.
All right, so that's like for Pete and I keep in mind as when we eventually get deeper into this game. So
Yeah.
all right, so let's get into what we're doing here today. So we are starting with the Skywalker region, our third region of the four here. So these are the matches we're covering today here. We got both Luke Vader battles in the bracket. Empire Strikes Back is the number one seed here. Takes on the play-in winner, Ahsoka and Baylan from episode 4 of Ahsoka. The other side here, Ahsoka and Anakin, the World Between Worlds, episode 5 Ahsoka, and Luke versus Vader in Return of the Jedi here. So we got two Ahsoka battles and the two Luke Vader battles. So this is an interesting setup here, Pete.
Yeah, it worked out kind of nicely there. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, so let's get into this here. So we'll start with our first matchup here, the Luke Vader matchup against the Ahsoka Baylan matchup here. So Luke Vader episode 5. We all know this fight. This is one of the most famous fights in Star Wars history. This is the I am your father fight where Luke gets his hand chopped off in Cloud City here. So Pete, revisiting this one, what were your big takeaways?
It's a good lightsaber battle. It's iconic because of the storyline around it. It, to me, it's probably one of the strongest in the original trilogy.
Yeah. I will say, Nick, too, watching it again, and like it's so long, they split it in a couple of different videos on YouTube where you get the first portion where it gets thrown out the window, and then you get the second portion where it gets the I am your father speech here. I think surprisingly, like the choreography is much better than I remembered it for a 1980 lightsaber fight.
I was actually going to bring that up. I was going to say that when you hear about the original trilogy, you talk about it, you think a lot about the choreography from that
Recalls.
first battle, that episode 4, A New Hope, Obi-Wan Vader battle, and it's mocked a lot, and it's old, and that kind of makes sense. There's nothing against it. Obviously, at the time, there's nothing wrong with that. But the advancement that they made from 77 to 80 is huge because the choreography in this Luke Vader battle is not bad at all. At all. It doesn't look out. It doesn't look outdated even. It looks good.
Yeah.
So I like this battle a lot. I think it deserved the 1 seed, and it's obviously the when it comes to like importance and whatnot, how we do our criteria or how the criteria was made for determining the ranks here. Obviously, this is well above others in
Yeah.
that sense.
And Pete, everybody remembers this fight. You can't go to anybody and say, oh, Luke Vader fight in episode 5. And you're like, huh?
Well, I think it's fair to say, and this is for me. I remember the importance of the fight. I remember pretty much what happens with the Luke, I'm your father. Or, I know that's the stereotypical line. It's not the actual line. But I don't know if I could say I remember the choreography to a T. To be honest, I wasn't able to rewatch it, so like I kind of have the gist of it, but I can't remember exactly what happens other than the importance of that scene. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it's definitely memorable to say the least.
Okay. Anybody want to add anything on this one before we go its matchup opponent?
It just like remember that original battle, that Obi-Wan Vader battle in episode 4, and how like he turned around and did like a circle, like a 360, and that was like, whoa, that was the big move back then. Remember in this one, I don't know if this is a part I remember specifically is Luke like kicks Vader down, and he falls down the stairs and stuff. Like
Yeah.
that's that's like really good for 1980. Really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Plus, you have the part that people don't always remember is the beginning part of this fight when Vader's trying to freeze Luke in the carbonite to bring him to the Emperor. He kicks him down into the pit where they froze Han Solo, and then all of a sudden you turn around, Luke's like jumped onto the ceiling of the Force, and then jump. I think that's right when he jumps and knocks Vader down. Like that's a pretty
Yeah.
cool great part of the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this one's a good one here. You guys ready to go to Ahsoka and Baylan?
Of course.
Yeah. So this one, it's play-in matchup here to get in here. This is the fight on episode 4 when Ahsoka's trying to prevent the Baylan crew from getting the star maps up to go find Thrawn. They end up having this big fight here. It's a lot of heavy-handed fighting, not a lot of dialogue in it, I feel like. So, Nick, what were your big takeaways from Ahsoka Baylan?
My biggest takeaway is the choreography is really good, but it's 2023 choreography.
Yes.
So I'm not actually going to say the choreography was that good. My biggest takeaway, though, when we're sitting here talking about it, is I don't remember it at all until I went back to rewatch the fight. And
Yeah.
to me, that speaks volumes as to why it was a play-in and why it's not listed as one of these top seeds and why I don't think it competes in this matchup here is I don't remember it at all. At
Yeah.
all. Outside of I think he kicked her off the side of the into the water.
Yeah. At the end,
Battle, which is how the next episode started.
he knocks her basically off the cliff at the end.
Yeah, that's the only thing I remembered going into the rewatch of it. So to me, that it suffers a lot from that.
Yeah, Pete, to me, I think the thing that I take away from this fight is I think the Ray Stevenson performance in this fight was also very good because like he's nails his choreography and like his dialogue he throws in here, like throwing jabs about Anakin's history to Ahsoka helps a lot. And I think his performance really helped us push this through the plane, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that we'll see a trend with the newer shows being, I don't want to say better in choreography. You think you maybe expect it to be better because of just the talent of the actors nowadays compared to maybe back in the 70s and 80s. Stunt doubles were a thing obviously back then too, but the choreography has gotten more intricate, I believe, nowadays. I think that it's memorable for me because of how much I liked the show. I don't know if that's because of the lightsaber battle, though. I think all the lightsaber battles were interesting to me and I enjoyed them, but I think that's a biased take versus what it actually is. Like Nick said, I can't remember exactly what happened except for the very end where she gets kicked off the side of the mountain or the cliff. So not very memorable if we're going to go by that, but I still think it looked good because we were in a later timeline, right? The lightsabers look better. The choreography is a little bit better done, if you will. But I think Nick is right. I think the matchup is pretty much set.
Yeah, and Nick, I do with this performance, watching again, just made me realize like they're gonna have a hard time when they have to recast Ray Stevenson in this role for Baylan.
They are. He was great. We'll see what they do in the future with the character and the actor, but it's gonna be tough.
It's gonna be tough. Do you guys want to weigh in on this at all? Are you ready to vote?
I don't think we have to vote.
Yeah, I think it's as safe as a clean sweep.
Yep.
Nick,
This might be the cleanest sweep I think we've had because to me, some of the other ones have been like, yes, I assumed that this one was going to win, but in this one, it's like I can't even consider giving this a point.
yeah. How did it do in the people's bracket, Nick?
You throw me under the bus here. I can get it. You might have to give me 5 seconds, but I can get it.
Yeah, yeah. And I just to see Pete how the people did with this vote. I feel like
let me tell you something. I may have skewed the vote a little bit. Let me explain why.
You may have put your foot on the scale.
You know when you're tapping through Instagram stories?
Yes.
I went a little too center and I tapped like answers. So or like on one or two of them, I kind of messed up. So
it was 80-20.
Maybe a little skewed.
Yeah, so 80-20 from the audience. I'm surprised that Ahsoka Baylan got votes in this.
I got some votes.
Might have been my vote. Got to be honest. I don't. I didn't select that.
I also do not have capability once it's finished to see the number here. So this could have been
4-1.
It could have been 8 out of 10. It could have been 16 out of 20. I don't know. It could have been 4-1. We don't know.
Yeah, it could have been 40 out of 50. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't. I have no idea how many people voted on this one. But I would assume more than 5.
Yes, I would assume more than 5. And Ahsoka Baylan, I think getting votes here, credit to the show that Ahsoka is able to produce a vote, like some votes here from this against one of the more iconic lightsaber battles in Star Wars history.
I still say to date, I think it's the best live action Star Wars show,
Yeah.
but I know it's a hot take.
It is a hot take. And let's go on to the other half of this bracket here. We have the Ahsoka and Anakin fight in the World Between Worlds from episode 5 Ahsoka against Luke and Vader from Return of the Jedi here. So, Pete, where would you like to start here?
Um, let's start with Ahsoka.
Okay. The Ahsoka Anakin fight on the World Between Worlds. This is where the vision of Anakin we see talking to Ahsoka says, "You have something left to learn." And then they have this fight at the beginning. He slices the bridge she's on, send her back into memories. And they had the fight at the end where Anakin basically dares her to kill him. And then she says, "No, I choose to live." And he smirks like, "You passed the test, basically. There's still hope for you yet." And that basically gets her in back into reality here. So, Nick, what do you think about this lightsaber fight? We had classic choreography. We got the patented Hayden Christensen lightsaber twirling behind the back of one hand. We got a lot of cool stuff in here.
Very good battle. This is the one I remember from Ahsoka, much more than the one we discussed prior.
Yeah.
Very good battle. A couple of really cool shots in this one too. If I remember, there's one of Anakin like walking towards her, where he's just like kind of like going in between Anakin and Vader.
Yeah, and they modulate the voice too.
Yeah, very very cool. Very good. Not else that I can say though. My opinion on this will be clear soon.
Yeah, and Pete, another underrated part of this fight here is that this also partially involves like three different actors. You have Hayden Christensen, obviously you have Rosario Dawson, you have Ariana Greenblatt plays young Ahsoka and gets some moves of her own in before Anakin kicks her back into the time and get Rosario Dawson back. So three different actors involved in this one, which I think is also a credit to all the choreography they had to learn.
Yeah, I think this is one of my top lightsaber battles. I think it has so much to it. It's not just a typical lightsaber battle. Um, we've seen lightsaber battles cut between different things where you cut away from the lightsaber battle, come back. This was like all encompassing and probably the one of the best artistically made lightsaber battles. I want to say cinematography because it's a lot that goes into that, but artistically made. And I think that it speaks volumes to the show. And I also think that this was probably the only flashbacks that no one had a problem with.
Yes.
I mean, every time we've talked, at least in this podcast, about flashbacks, sometimes they're poorly done, poorly executed, poorly timed. This was perfect. I don't think anyone had any problems with those flashbacks. So it's highly memorable for me. I think the choreography is excellent. I think the overall creativity of it is also excellent. Only thing is, I don't remember a score if there was one, or there probably was the typical Vader score or something along those lines. That's the only thing I'm having trouble saying was a important point of that fight.
And Nick, one thing I liked also in this fight is that the attention to detail here. Some of these things, like how in the fight begins, Anakin's using his blue lightsaber, and then when he kicks her back out, we have the flashes between Vader and Anakin. He's using the red lightsaber, like stuff like that. It's like attention to detail. I think it gives this a lot of points.
Oh, I agree. And being a 2023 battle allows that, you know.
Yeah.
So and that's great. I'm glad they did. I'm glad they took advantage of the technology.
Yep. All right. Anything else you want to add here before we go on to Luke Vader in Return of the Jedi? All right. Let's go ahead and move on to the final lightsaber battle of the original trilogy, Luke and Vader on the Death Star 2. This is where Palpatine's trying to lure Luke to the dark side. We see like Luke and Vader are fighting here to a point where Luke basically is trying to avoid being goaded by Palpatine giving into the dark side. See, at one point, the Vader basically picks up from Luke that he has a sister. He says, "Well, if you won't join me, maybe she will." And then this causes Luke to lose his mind. He taps into his rage. He basically beats the crap out of Vader and slices his arm off to the point where Palpatine basically says, "Oh, like good, go ahead and kill him and take his place as my apprentice." And then Luke just throws the lightsaber down and says, "I'm a Jedi my father before me." And then that leads to the whole thing with the Force lightning and Vader sort of turning back and killing the Emperor, which should have been his final death, but sequels undid all that. But Pete, your thoughts on this lightsaber battle?
Super important, super impactful. I think going up against the Ahsoka fight, choreography is it's an unfair fight. like Nick had mentioned, the technology, they kind of took advantage of that technology. So it's kind of difficult for me to separate that. But it's memorable. It's super important to the story. It's what was the end cap of a saga, later to be changed. Um, but yeah, I mean, I overall it's a great lightsaber battle and a super important one, at that.
Yeah, Nick, the important point is interesting also because obviously, as Pete mentioned here, this is the final battle of what was at one point the entire Star Wars saga before the sequels were invented. So we have this going on here. It's important to the storyline and seeing the whole picture come together and get wrapped up in the bow is pretty cool. But like it loses on choreography to the one it's up against in the Ahsoka Anakin fight. But that one feels important to where we're going. We don't know where that picture is going. This is a very complicated decision.
It is. This battle is one of my favorites. The Luke Vader episode 6. I always loved this one. Keep in mind, 1983 when it came out. Think about the flips Luke was doing and whatnot. I think the choreography is fantastic for 1983. And I think more than maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think more than assuming you're watching Star Wars for the first time, I think more than any fight in all of Star Wars, this fight has you on the edge of your seat more
Yep.
than any other one because
Yep.
it is Luke against Vader. I know we had that already last movie, but we have it again in a more grand, I
Scale.
guess, atmosphere. Being on the Death Star in the Emperor's throne room with the Emperor there watching them. This is, to me, this is the most edge of your seat you can possibly be. You know something's going down. No pun intended with the Emperor going down, but the yeah, you know something's going down in that fight, and it does. I love the way you see that Luke has that anger in him, like his father. He's able to channel it towards the end of that. Like after he kind of goes all out with his aggression, he is able to channel it back. He notices that he also has the hand like his dad, realizes we're not really that different. And yeah, I mean, the way he throws the lightsaber of Jedi like my father, like that entire thing is absolutely incredible. And I know it's not technically part of the battle, but like Vader killing the Emperor, or at least killing the Emperor, we know that is later undone, but it's not technically part of the battle, but that's like one of the biggest moments in all of Star Wars. It's the redemption of Anakin Skywalker, and that happened in this battle.
Yes. It's the conclusion of Anakin's story for the most part.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Do you consider it part of the battle? I do.
I do. I think it's a part of the battle.
Just because the lightsabers weren't touching anymore, it's still part of the battle to me. So to me, this is a top tier battle that I think has sneaky upset alert into the final four.
Yeah, I would agree with that one here. But I think obviously the challenge I feel with Pete trying to make a decision is again, like you noted Ahsoka Anakin, the choreography is fantastic. And compared to like 1983 choreography, he's not gonna win that. But like as I mentioned earlier, like this is a very important point in the Ahsoka storyline, and Ahsoka knows an important presence in Star Wars storytelling for the next couple of years, but we don't see the finished picture yet. So we don't see where that realization she has in this fight where she chooses to live leads to. So it's tough. It's a tough call.
To me, and you guys weigh in on this because I'm curious to see what you think. To me, because of the sequel trilogy, I said this is a super important lightsaber battle. I kind of want to bring that back. I feel like the sequels delegitimize it a little bit, right? It's the end of Anakin's story, and that's super important. Um, but because the Emperor comes back, because some people would say Luke fails as a Jedi and his character becomes also delegitimized, right? He's just kind of this like failure of a Jedi who doesn't really do much. Like, do we think that the ending of the saga, episode 6, is that important anymore? Right. So, like, for me, Anakin becoming Darth Vader in episode 3, he goes on to live out the legacy. He restores order to the Force. Perfect. So, like, Anakin's storyline, I think, is very important from start to finish. Luke's and the Emperor's, I feel like it's just like episode 6, their storyline gets thrown out the window a little bit, right? Luke comes out of episode 6 thinking, looking like a badass and, helping Anakin saga end. But I feel like maybe it just takes away the legitimacy of that battle a little bit, right? Just a little bit. And I'm curious to see what you guys think.
Yeah, Nick, any thoughts on that?
I don't disagree. I think that it does put a little dagger in it, like adult. But then again, it kind of puts a dagger in the entire saga.
Yeah,
Like everything that happens prior, it's like, well, it doesn't matter.
yeah.
Doesn't
It does.
matter. Why blow up the Death Star? Doesn't really matter. Why blow up the second Death Star? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know? Why have Anakin turn back to the light side of the Force, if you will, and kill the Emperor? Doesn't matter.
Right.
Nothing really matters.
I think I come from in the angle of I remember when we did the episode rankings that the Empire Strikes Back doesn't have that shock value anymore because you know Anakin is Darth Vader,
Yeah.
right? Like the I'm your father, I think line becomes so much more, I don't know, less valuable in my opinion because we know it, right? If you watch start to finish, at least for people who are not um, born early enough to see the originals when they came out. So I think that's the angle I was coming at a little bit. But anyway, we should carry on. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point though, Pete. I do feel like in terms of like the storyline as a whole, like we had a nice perfect bow and like the legacy of a couple of these characters just gets like completely changed by the sequels having to tell a different story and in some cases like repeating the storyline that we got in parts of this trilogy. So obviously like it does like when this ending basically kind of gets like redone or like decanonized or retcon, like it kind of hurts it a little bit. All right, are we ready to vote on this?
Yes.
All right, so Pete, I'll give you the first vote here.
So I want to give it to Ahsoka because of everything we talked about, but I do think that there was a lot left to learn, and I don't know how important that battle is going to be. And to be objective for the choreography back in the 80s versus now, I think they're both still ahead of their time. So I have to give it to the episode 6 battle, Luke versus Vader.
Nick, your vote.
I'm also giving to the Luke Vader battle.
Yeah. I'm going to the same as you guys are making another sweep here because I feel like the legacy of the Ahsoka Anakin one is not written yet. And if we have this conversation in 5 years after we see how the Mandoverse plays out, maybe we have a different conversation. But I do think, like, based on what we know right now, I think Luke Vader has 6 has to go through.
I
Fair.
agree.
All right. So, how did the people vote on this one, Nick?
It was 50-50 actually, but the tiebreaker went to Luke Vader.
So the audience was dead tied on this one. Wow.
The tiebreaker is just a random person, whoever I could find, a friend of the podcast, and just who didn't vote. I make sure they didn't vote, and I just ask them, "What do you think?"
Yeah, so by one vote, this one moves on here. This shows the debate we had was merited because the audience was very split on this one as well, Pete.
Yeah, it's awesome to see.
All right, so now we get to pick your flavor of Luke Vader. Do you want the Empire flavor or do you want the Return of the Jedi flavor here? So, Nick, you can go first here.
I'm calling the upset. I think the Return of the Jedi fight is better than the Empire Strikes Back fight. Obviously, there's more shock value with the "I am your father" line and the ending, and it's definitely more iconic. But I think the battle in Episode 6 is better. It's 3 years later, so there will be some advancements in technology, but I think the choreography is leaps and bounds better. And the atmosphere of being in the Emperor's throne room on the Death Star and having all the stakes of so many things going on at the same time. Lando with the attack on the Death Star, Han and gang on Endor trying to get the shield down. So much going on at once, building this tension while they're on the Death Star fighting. I think it's the ultimate original trilogy battle, and for that reason, I am voting Luke Vader Episode 6 as the upset to the Final Four.
I'm going to also put Luke Vader 6 through. I think it is very iconic fight. I think it's not, I think it was seated too low here. I think any of these top three was a worthy pick to get through this bracket. I do think Luke Vader 6, though. I think for the reason you said, I think plus like the legacy it has, I think needs to be on here. Pete, would you have voted the same way? Would you have given Luke Vader 5 the vote?
No, and it was a little bit different. It's because I think that the I don't think it's as iconic anymore, right? I mean, that was that's my feeling since we ranked the episodes of the movies. So, I think that 6 needs to go through because of pretty much everything you guys said, but also too, to me, it's not as iconic as it used to be now that the prequels are out.
Yeah. Nick, where did the audience land? I know they put both of these through.
Sorry, lost the mute button there. The audience disagreed with us, but it was very close, and they pushed episode 5 through, the Luke Vader episode 5 fight, with a 56% vote, so 56 to 44.
Yeah, so they were very divided here. So this is really one of our first times we really disagree with the audience here. So
Yeah, I think that it's hard to explain all of our criteria on an Instagram story, but I think when you just look at these two at face value and you just say which one's better, your mind's automatically going to go to that episode 5 one because it is definitely a more iconic fight. But I don't think that's necessarily what we're asking, and it's hard. I can't write so many words in the story. Well, like what I really mean to say is these are the criteria. List 5 things. I don't have space for that on the screen. So when it comes to, of course, which one's more iconic, yeah, I think it is that one. But when it comes to which one's a better battle and the criteria that we're using here, I think it's episode 6.
yeah, and just to clarify here, Pete, we do have a reel up a couple weeks ago from bracketologist Max Roberts explaining the criteria. People want to go back and listen to that if you're just trying to catch up on the reels here.
It is available. It is out there.
Yeah. All right. So that's it for this region here. Next week we do our final region before the final. We're going to the Ahsoka region with some of these battles here. Three animated battles here. Ahsoka and Vader from Rebels, the Twilight Apprentice fight. We have Dooku and Yaddle from Tales of the Jedi, which want to play in to get in here. Obi-Wan and Vader, the original Star Wars lightsaber battle. The very first one is the 2 seed here, and Obi-Wan and Maul from Rebels. So this one could go a lot of different ways, Pete.
For sure.
Excited to talk about that.
I think this is a weak region.
Yeah, so you did not like the grouping here.
I mean, I don't disagree with the bracketologists. I just think that some of these matchups just got put into a weak region, just how it works out with the seedings.
Yeah, you would have would you have been happy if Ahsoka and Anakin had been in this region instead of the one it was in today?
Yeah, probably. Maybe, I don't know. I don't disagree with any of the rankings here. Like I said, any of the seedings. It's just unfortunate the way things landed.
Yeah, because I think if we had maybe gotten Obi-Wan and Vader in the other bracket and that one over here, I think we would have had a lot of fun with that one.
Perhaps.
All right, so we'll check in next week and see how that's going here. I thank you guys for coming on here as always. Pete, if you want to follow you on social media, how can I do that?
At Consy29 on Twitter, CONSY29. AP Tyler 308 created the background I'm using on Reddit, so make sure you check them out.
Nick, one more time. People want to follow us on social media, how can I do that?
At Sky Guys Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, X, Threads, and TikTok.
Yeah, you can also follow me on social media, mphillips331. It's MPHILIPS 331. This week on Just in the Suffering podcast, Nick mentioned at the top of the show, he stopped by to do our NBA over-under pick. So that was a fun time, Nick.
It was a fun time, and my new motto for the year is "Go Rockets."
Yes, you can
Go
find out why you listen to that podcast. You want to check it out. We'll be back next week with the very final region before we get to the final four of the Star Wars lightsaber bracket. Until then, may the Force be with you.